Welcome to the Long Range Pursuit Podcast, presented by Gunwerks, where we learn about and share long-range shooting techniques, science, and gear.
Okay, we're coming at you with I think we're going to try a couple little rapid-fire podcast episodes here. So shorter, a little bit more to the point. Guys, let us know what you think about these. So this one, I want to talk about mounting a suppressor on a rifle and what the effects are on your rifle. We get lots of questions coming in all the time. So I've got Mac Simpson here from our team. Mac, this is your first time, so maybe introduce us a little bit to yourself. Engineer, been with us for, I guess you interned with us for a while, right?
Yeah, interned for 2 summers, yeah. And so I just started at Gunwerks full-time, what was it, last June, so coming up on a year now.
Coming up on a year, and it's been a wild ride, good time.
Oh, it has been. Loved working at Gunwerks.
Yeah.
Good to get some time out of the office to get out here for a podcast.
Yeah. And you're a Cody native too, right?
I am, born and raised Cody. Yep, got my engineering degree in Laramie at the University of Wyoming. And then right back home to Cody.
And it's you bring in interns and it's always like test the waters and see if this kid's got what it takes. And we brought you back for a second year. And then, I think you were hired, whether you knew it or not, you were hired well before you actually finished school. So.
Oh, right. I was working part-time my senior year through school.
Heck yeah, man. It's awesome. And it's been good. We've been able to work together really closely on a bunch of projects here over the last year. And we've got a couple pretty cool projects up our sleeves here.
Yeah, some exciting stuff. Keep your eye out.
On a wide variety of product lines. We're talking suppressors today, but there's some other fun stuff that's coming down the line. Mm-hmm. So keep your eyes out. Okay, so suppressors, I'm going to just start kind of rapid fire a few questions that come into our sales team pretty often. Mac's got a pretty good technical background here, so kind of talk through a few of these, and if you've considered a suppressor, you're just not quite sure what all it entails and what it might do to your gun, and are you going to have to change things, we'll talk through a few of these and answer a few questions here. So one of the big ones that we get a lot is, do I need to re-zero my rifle with a suppressor? Is it going to change things when I mount a suppressor onto my gun?
For sure. And that's one of the things we recommend you do. First thing, you get your suppressor, throw that thing on and get a new zero. And we call that point of impact shift. And with our suppressors, at least, I can't speak for competitors, but we see a very consistent point of impact shift for all our suppressors across all our rifles.
Yeah.
So, and really the benefit to that is that each time you take that suppressor on and off, it's gonna have that same point of impact shift. So that first time you throw the suppressor on, get an idea of where that point of impact shift is. Okay, I know it's 1 MOA left and it's an MOA and a half high.
Yeah.
So then next time I throw that can on, I know, okay, I'm expecting 1.5 high, 1 left.
And I would echo that. I mean, of any suppressor I've ever run, almost any rifle I've run, I've very rarely seen it not change point of impact. I think I had one 6.5 PRC once that was like a unicorn, that somehow it just didn't care whether the suppressor was on and off. But it's really outside of that, I've not seen that happen very often. And so really what it comes down to, like you said, is just knowing what that is, I like to take a note and write it down and say, okay, I know that my suppressors, when I mount it on, it's 1.5 inches low and, 3/4 minute, it probably should be thinking minutes, not inches, but right. And it's really easy to re-zero when you take that suppressor on and off.
Right. And everybody out there these days, not everybody, I should say, but you got so many drop charts on people's rifles these days,
Yeah.
What, it takes 2 seconds to throw your point of impact shift right under your drop chart.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I guess there's maybe also worth mentioning the return to zero. So you imagine, okay, you've zeroed your rifle with your suppressor, because realistically, most of us, once we buy a suppressor, we're not hardly ever shooting without it. That's really the end of the day. You don't really want to shoot it without the suppressor on once you own the thing, right? So really just that 1-0 is going to get you going, but you may need to take that suppressor on off to fit it in a case, put it in a rifle scabbard, if you're hunting on horses or something like that. And what have you seen as far as repeatability or return to zero, taking that suppressor on, off, on, off?
And I've seen no problem with it. So I've done a lot of testing on some things that are in the works that I can't really talk about at this point, as well as our whole line of current suppressors. And across the board, we see a consistent return to zero.
Yeah.
for example, I was shooting a group the other day. I threw the can on and saw an impact shift. It was about 1.5 up and 1 right. Pulled the can off probably 3 times throughout the day, and each time returned to that same 0.
Right.
I mean, and that was hours apart, letting the gun cool down between shootings. So
I would say if you've got time, it's a good idea to confirm that. I have seen, and some suppressors out there will do it more than others. I think that's one thing that we did early on in our suppressor developing the taper mounts and things that we did to make sure that those suppressors are optimized for that return to 0. Because we know guys are traveling to hunt, whatever else, inevitably you do have to take that suppressor off, and sometimes you don't get a really good chance to re-zero. But if you have the time, I've seen stuff maybe move a click one way or the other. It's not a bad idea to confirm if you can.
for sure. And the better you know your personal rifle, the better. I mean, I'd say that's always the case.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, and this is, I'm not really a technical guy, right? Like to get an answer from an engineer here. Is that point of impact shift, what do you think is the mechanism behind that? I've always had this theory that there's a little bit of barrel droop coming into play, because I don't have the data to prove this, but I feel like on average, and it's not always the case, but usually you're hitting lower with a suppressor on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have seen you hit high with a suppressor on, so I think there's a harmonic effect that we all talk about. I think that is the biggest thing, but I have a hunch that throwing a pound or half a pound of steel on the end of a barrel is creating a little bit of flex in that barrel as well.
Right.
Am I totally up in the night, or what do you think?
Well, I'd have to do some more testing
Sure.
to really prove this out.
Yeah.
But my theory on it is that it's not so much droop. It is deflecting the end of your muzzle downward.
Okay. Minute amount.
Minute amount.
Okay.
And
Extrapolated.
but when you look at high-speed video, as soon as you click that round off, as soon as that bullet fires and it starts traveling down the rifling, that end of your muzzle is going to whip up before the bullet's even out the muzzle. Right. So I don't know how much droop really has to play into it, and more that it's changing your harmonics.
It's just the harmonics. Okay.
Right.
Well, I guess the way to test that would be to test 100 barrels and see if it's average up and down the same versus
Right. And that's the only way to really test for harmonics these days. I mean, you can simulate for harmonics, but really at the end of the day, it's just data is king.
Absolutely.
The more barrels you can test, the better you have an idea how your harmonics goes.
That's kind of the thing we've learned with suppressors, is there's enough variables in that system that none of us, at least in this building, have quite figured out how to fully predict how things work with suppressors. So a lot of it is iterative, test and iterate kind of things.
Right. Flow simulation isn't the end all be all. Sure. I mean, and it won't be for long decades if I had to take a guess.
Maybe some AI getting involved there.
Right. Like you have, for example, the mouse clips and pretty much everybody does this in their suppressor baffles. Those little clips you see cut out of the baffles, and they're all usually pretty aligned in the baffle stack.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, everybody's got an idea for why that works, but
they know it works, but
they know it
why?
works and don't know why. Exactly. And so you have a lot of things like that. Suppressors can be very iterative. You find what works, you stick with it, you figure out why some things may not work.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, next question I've got here is, does a suppressor change my ballistics? And this question comes up a lot. Okay, now I've got a custom ballistic turret or whatever else. Do I need to go change things once I throw a suppressor on my gun?
In my experience, it's not enough to really throw a wrench into things. I mean, you can see an increase in velocity throwing the can on. And so, especially if you're using our ballistics calculator, and you're truing your profile correctly, it's accounting for that change in velocity.
Yeah. And
really, at the end of the day, that's all the adjustment you need to make.
So we actually just shot a little video of this a couple weeks ago. It's probably live on YouTube now. And we took a couple of our school guns. So these are 6.5 Creedmoors. I think they're 20 or 22 inch barrels. And we shot with and without an 8-inch suppressor. And if I'm going off of memory, I think it was a 12 foot per second increase that we saw, right? So you're 2,800 to 2,812 or something like that. So it's relatively minor, and really in the scheme of things, it's kind of often within the noise of your natural variation in your velocity, and if you've got a carbon ring in your bore that's artificially increasing velocities or whatever else. But I will say that with those Creedmoors, you're a little bit lower BC bullet, a little bit lower velocity. We saw at 1,000 yards, it was, I think, about a half-minute difference. So enough to consider it. If you know what that velocity is with the suppressor, it's not a bad idea to adjust your ballistics. But generally speaking, it's not a drastic change. It's just a very, very minute increase in velocity. Typically, I think that's just a function of a little bit more back pressure, an effective extension of your barrel length that's increasing that bullet velocity just a little bit.
Right. And I mean, as you're saying, I do think that's kind of within the margin of error for most people's factory ammo. So, yeah, unless you're hand loading or using the Gunwerks specific ammo, really, I mean, you're going to see an extreme spread in velocity of 60 feet per second anyway, just in some factory ammo.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
And if you're using the Gunwerks ammo, that extreme spread's going to be down somewhere closer to 20 feet per second.
Sure.
So then it is a larger chunk
Right.
of your extreme spread. You might see more of a variation in some better loaded ammo.
And those could stack, and so it'll increase that. But yeah, and again, and I think the other thing is most of us are hunting with larger rounds, higher velocity, better BCs, and so that effect is going to be even less pronounced with some of those bigger, faster guns.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Will a suppressor affect my accuracy? And when we say accuracy, generally we're speaking on precision or group size, right? The colloquial accuracy. What's your experience been there?
Right. And one second. On accuracy, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry. So we see with our suppressors, and I mean, you see it with a lot of suppressors, that you do see an improvement in precision. You're right. It is precision, not accuracy. Accuracy is how well you're hitting the bullseye of the target. Precision is how tight that group is.
Right.
So we see about a quarter-minute improvement in group size when you throw a can on.
Okay.
So you'll take your 3/4-minute gun to about a half-minute gun putting a can on.
Yeah. And in fact, funny, we just shot a similar video trying to, we've assumed this, we feel like we've seen it, let's prove it out. And it was a night and day difference, at least with our school guns out there in those 6.5 Creedmoors, significant improvement in group size with the suppressor on. And I think speaking more broadly, just talking to people in industry, experience with a variety of different rifle systems and suppressors, I would say I've next to never heard of issues where a suppressor would degrade precision. It would almost always be improving groups, or at least holding consistent groups, what you were seeing before without the suppressor.
Right. And I think the biggest thing you need to watch when you're putting the suppressor on is not so much groups opening up. It's that point of impact shift.
Absolutely.
That's really going to throw those shooters off that are inexperienced with cans.
What do you think would be the mechanism behind that? Why do we generally see an improvement in precision group size with a suppressor on?
That's really hard to say. I do think some of it is that the flow coming out the end of the can is slightly more laminar, and I guess that's not the word, less turbulent than it would be coming out of the muzzle of your
The suppressor is kind of capturing or pulling that away from the bullet as it's exiting the muzzle, essentially.
And no suppressor short of subsonic 22 suppressors are going to get that flow subsonic yearly.
Right.
And even 22 suppressors, most of them are gonna not achieve subsonic still.
Sure.
God, where was I going with that?
It's less disruptive to the bullet's flight path. Is that kind of?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess it's weird because when you look at the crown of a barrel, the gas has to escape that crown around the bullet perfectly symmetrically, or else it's going to it's throwing inaccuracy into your bullet.
Okay.
And when you slow those gases down and you pull a lot of the heat out of those gases, which is what the suppressor is doing,
okay,
that air forcing its way around the bullet out the end of the can is not so aggressive and turbulent.
Okay.
And in my opinion, from the data I've seen, that's what's improving the precision of these cans.
Okay. Is there anything to be said about just increasing that mass on the end of the barrel, unless or more inertia? And this is my non-engineering background speaking here. Am I totally up in the night, or is there something there that I guess I could imagine that muzzle just having less whip because there's more inertia there?
Right, and that would have to be tested to really be proven. I mean, it's all gonna
Maybe.
right. It's all gonna depend on harmonics at the end of the day. Like, people always say increasing the weight of your barrel is gonna get you a better shooting barrel,
Sure.
and that's almost always true.
Mhm.
When people say that, they usually mean the uniformly across the whole barrel, get a
Sure.
larger contour.
Right.
Throwing a mass out on the end of the barrel is really changing the harmonics in a way that you can't predict.
You just have to test it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. But we've tested it, and we do know it works. Whether that's the actual mechanism behind it or not, I guess that's the thing to be proven.
Right. And who's to say that, slightly lighter or slightly heavier on your can won't improve your harmonics, but
Right.
it's yet to be seen.
And it could be different rifle to rifle even.
Exactly.
Potentially.
Right. And barrel length changes your harmonics significantly. So, a 6+ on an 18-inch barrel is going to have very different harmonics than a 6+ on a 22-inch barrel.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, last question I got here for this little rapid fire episode is, does a suppressor reduce recoil?
Suppressors, in my experience, reduce recoil pretty significantly. Not quite as much as a muzzle brake.
Right.
A bare muzzle brake seems to reduce recoil.
Generally speaking, yeah, it's going to be more efficient than I guess we're always going off of perceived recoil, right? It's, generally most guys aren't out there actually measuring the recoil impulse of a rifle. They're going off of what they feel and experience.
Right. So if you work the math out, the free recoil
Mhm.
through a suppressor may be better than a muzzle brake.
Okay.
But in our experiences, that muzzle brake improves the felt recoil
Yeah.
the most.
Right. And I think that would be echoed by, if you kind of jump into some of the competitive rifle space, very few guys are running suppressors in that space. And I think that's a game of running fast guns and mitigating recoil. A lot of these guys are shooting little teeny 6 millimeters to minimize that. And so I think that's where that is they can spot their impacts a little bit better with a brake. And if it's that little tiny edge, they'll take it. They'll put on two sets of ear pro to protect them from the huge percussion from those big brakes,
Right.
And spot their bullets all the way out there. But for most of us, we want a little bit better shooting experience. We want to not completely damage our ears when we forgot to throw earplugs in, get excited and elks running over the hill, or whatever else. And seems suppressor's pretty much the way to go. I would generally say it, like put a can on a 28 nozzler, and it's going to be significantly better with a suppressor than it is with just a bare muzzle, right? Just a
For sure.
crowned muzzle.
I'd never actually shot a bare muzzle, because why would you?
Yeah.
Until just recently, and realized, oh wow, does the muzzle brake make so much more of a difference than you realize?
Yeah.
And I mean, back to the precision. I think if cans really did improve the ballistics and the precision all that much, you'd see those competition shooters using suppressors.
True.
At the end of the day, they, in their case at least, don't find that the juice is worth the
Yeah.
squeeze.
Now, my assumption has been with a suppressor that you're probably, if you were actually measuring, and I guess it depends on how you're measuring that recoil impulse, but all that gas still has to come out the end of the suppressor at the end of the day. You're just slowing it down. So my assumption has been that if you think about it like shooting a muzzleloader versus a centerfire rifle, to me, the experience shooting muzzleloader, I think it's a slower burning powder, and so it's more like a hard push than a sharp kick. And that's I kind of correlate similar shooting experience with a suppressor versus a complete, just a straight crowned muzzle, right? Is you're getting maybe still that same amount of push, but it's slower, so it feels significantly less.
Right. You're slowing the release of that gas. So by increasing the amount of time, the duration of time that the gas is exhausting out. You're going to have decreased recoil that way. But you got to think all that gas is still exhausting straight out.
Exactly.
Straight behind your muzzle, where then the resultant force is straight back into your shoulder.
Exactly. Right.
Where the benefit of a muzzle brake, a directional muzzle brake, is that gas is
actually able to push forward on
out
back.
and up.
Yeah.
Right. So not only is it deflecting your muzzle back to zero, so you're not having some crazy muzzle jump on your shot.
Yeah.
It's directing so much of that gas outward that not so much gets back to the shooter in belt recoil.
Yeah. Great. Well, some pretty good intel there. For the guys that are been shooting suppress for all these years, it's probably all nothing new here for most of those guys. But I think there's a lot of people that are starting to realize that, now I can get a tax stamp in a matter of days instead of a year or 10 months. I've been thinking about it for a long time. It's a really great time to get a suppressor. So hopefully we've kind of answered a few of those questions, taken a little bit of uncertainty out of the equation there for you. We've got a couple more follow-ups here that we'll drop here in the next few weeks on, what the good process of getting a tax stamp and the purchase process and a few other things. So keep in touch there and give us a holler if you got any questions. Here to help you out. Well, thanks for jumping on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Landon. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Till next time, guys.
If you like what you're hearing here, please take a second and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate your feedback and suggestions for topics you'd like discussed or questions you want answered on the podcast. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram or send us an email to podcast@gunwerks.com. Also, be sure and check out our full offering of long-range gear at gunwerks.com. Use promo code LRP for free shipping on any order.